All right, how's this for an intriguing title? Was Bill Clinton secretly a preacher? Was Bill Clinton secretly a preacher? I got this idea or this thought this morning from my quote book. I added this quote from Clinton's book, his autobiography, My Life. And in that book, he said this, or he wrote this. He said, successful presidential campaigns require three basic things. First, people have to be able to look at you and imagine you as president. In other words, you have to look presidential. Then you have to have enough money and support to become known. In other words, you have to be an effective fundraiser. You have to be the guy that can raise funds and bring together resources. And to do that, and he was a great networker, to do that, you have to connect with people. Because before people give to you, they have to buy in to you. And then the third thing, he says, you got to act the part, you got to be an effective fundraiser, and then you have to be a good communicator. And boy, I like the way he put it. And after that, it's a battle of ideas, messages, and issues. And man, now with how the world's changed since the 90s and 80s when he was running for elections, we have all these opinions and covenant. Your people come into church and they've got all kinds of things bouncing around in their head, and you have to really be a good communicator to connect and to lead people. But anyway, we're all busy, and so I want to just deal with the first one today. I may circle back around and deal with the other two, but I want to deal with the first one. And when I was thinking about this morning, this whole concept of people have to be able to see you being their pastor before they allow you to be their pastor. Now they may keep coming to church, but they never accept you, embrace you as really their pastor. They have to see you as their pastor. I remember this came back to me so vividly when I was the youth pastor at the Fort Mill Church of God many years ago. This would have been like in the 1970s, in a previous century. And I got a strep germ in my heart cavity. And honestly, one night I thought I was dying. And the doctor said I could have died. It could have killed me. And I thought I was dying. And I lived in a little youth parsonage that they had there, Sanja and I. We were newlyweds. And I was laying on that bed and I was frightened that I was about to die. And I for the only time in my life, I asked Sanja to call for my pastor. He was my boss, but he was also my pastor. I'll never forget, in just a few minutes, in the middle of the night, must have been 2 o'clock in the morning, I don't remember the exact time, but Brother Alford, George Alford, he came walking into my bedroom, walking into our house and walking into my bedroom, and he was in full-blown Sunday morning preacher garb. He had gotten up out of bed, put on his Sunday to-go meeting suit, his dress shoes, he had a tie, the whole thing. And when he walked into that room, it wasn't just an ordinary man. It was my pastor. He played the role to a T. And it brought such comfort to me when not just one of my buddies, that night I didn't call for one of my buddies. I had one of my youth leaders in the church, or I needed my pastor, and he played that role to a T. And to this day, when I go to the hospital, I usually dress, when I'm going to walk into a room, I usually try to dress the way I do on Sunday. I guess, and maybe that's an overkill. You don't have to. I'll leave that up to you. But it was such a defining moment in my life. Now, my goal is not to get you and me to dress like George Alford, the standard back in those days. That's not my point. But my point is to remind each one of us that where we live and minister, and it's geographical and generational, but where we live and we minister, there is a minimal standard of what a good preacher looks like. There is a minimal standard in your church of what a good pastor does, how he conducts himself. And if we don't meet that minimal standard, we're not going to connect. If we're going to insist, I'm going to do this my way, and I'm going to dress the way I want to dress, I'm going to talk the way I want to talk, I'm going to live the way I want to live. Well, you can do that, but you will never connect at being their pastor. They have to first see you as Clinton put it, as being presidential. And I think that's, how real is that right now? Some of the concern and pushback we see in our nation right now is that the people that are wanting to be president, we don't feel real comfortable. I mean, seeing them, we don't feel secure in them being our president. And so it is an important issue. And so here's what I want you to do. Here's what I want you to think about. First of all, if you're just new to your church, this is a great time to do it, but it's never too late. Okay? And so I've got four things. Research the gold standard pastors where you serve. Just ask the people, and do this generationally, because people's not going to remember that great pastor. Some of your old timers, they're going to have this great pastor, and they measure every other pastor by him, and it was or her, but most of the time it would have been him, especially in those days. And there's this great man, and in their life, that is what a pastor should do. That's how they should conduct themselves. You need to know who those people are, and so do this generationally. And you will find, if you're pastoring a church that has generations that are connected to each other, they just pass it on. They may not have really known them, but they just bought in what their elders and each generation, they just buy into it. And so there's this minimal expectation. But do this generational. Ask yourself, or ask the people. You don't even have to tell them why, but just say, who was in your opinion, who was the gold standard pastor of this church? And why? How did they do? What made him that way? And just find out. And then here's another thing. The second thing I would encourage you to do is research among your people. Just ask them. Ask them who their go-to preachers are during the week. Who's your favorite preachers? And I usually, when I do this, I kind of joke. Besides me, that way. Besides me, who's your favorite preacher out there? Or something like that. It kind of takes the tension off. Because I promise you, they've got favorite preachers, and probably you and I are not on that short list. And you find out who they are, and you find out, and you research them, and because they are, in my early years, I would go to church, and my people had already listened. Here I am, this struggling pastor, and they had already listened to these top-notch, edited, all the lights, all the, TV evangelism, were TV preachers are just coming in back in the 80s. And man, these guys, they had the flash and dash, and they had it all. And of course, it's just continued to evolve. Well, your people have listened to all that. They've listened to podcasts. They've seen YouTube videos. They've looked at all this, and they've got their favorite go-to guys. And I promise you, they're measuring you by that grid. That this is the minimal standard. And we can ignore this, or we can embrace it and learn from it. And then I want to encourage you to research the norm in your community of what a good pastor is. And this is very geographical. And I learned this. I call it the Joe DeLulio factor. And if any of you from Fort Mill, from my day at least, you will know right away what I'm talking about. But Joe DeLulio and his family and others, these were like first and second, maybe third generation, some of their children, but these were Italians, New York City Italians that started moving down south, moving to the Charlotte area, and they started coming to my church. And Joe was quite a character. I love him, and he's gone on to be with the Lord, but he was quite a character. When he hit our church, it changed everything. But they were Roman Catholic, and they looked at everything through those lenses. And I remember when Joe started coming to our church, he called me Father Kemp. And I remember early on meeting with him, and he wanted to ask me questions, and he was really hungry. He was searching, trying to scramble around and get direction in his life, and he called me Father Kemp. And this was just an accident. On one Sunday, early on when they started coming, one Sunday I closed the service with the Lord's Prayer, Our Father who art in heaven. And Roman Catholics would call that the Our Father. And that gave those Catholic families so much peace. Oh, okay, this is a real church. These aren't heretics. And that's when it dawned on me, deep south, our culture, this is the expected, this is the standard of how church. And if you just want to swap members, but if you want to reach new people, people that are in dying non-biblical churches or people that have dropped out of church in your community, find out what they think. And I learned this even more so than when I moved to the North Central region, and they have a lot of Catholicism there, but they also have deep Lutheran roots, and so they don't judge me when they find out, especially if you go around throwing the title bishop around, that really ramps it up for someone that comes from a strongly liturgical or historical background, and so research. Just observe in your community what their expectations of a good pastor is. And then, number 4, let me revive, I've gone a few minutes on this. Research the gold standard pastors in your church. Research the go-to pastors and their everyday lives in your people. Research the norm in your community. And then number 4, align yourself accordingly. Be what they think is presidential or pastoral. You can't come in and do it on your terms. You've got to do it on their terms if you hope to connect. Just like we would never vote for a guy, that we don't see as presidential. Who is this guy? I'm going to let him have the access to the red button, the secret codes to blow up the world. Man, I wouldn't vote for him for anything. We've got to have some confidence that this guy can handle the responsibility. And we start with our expectations of what a good president should be. Where the people are voting for us or against us every day, and they vote for us when they see us as being presidential or pastoral. Now I can hear you say, but hey, I don't want to be a hypocrite. I want to be real. I want to be able to be myself. I get it. But what I want you to do is be a real preacher. We all have roles to play. You are more than a preacher, but you're not less than a preacher. And your people have expectations of what a preacher should do, what is presidential, what is pastoral. And if we don't meet those, we're not going to connect. A few weeks ago, we had a guy that come to our door, and he's pest control. He was a pest control, representing a pest control company, pitching their company. Now, if he'd have come to our door and had an axe in his hand and looked wild-eyed and dirty and unkept, and he'd come to our door and rung our doorbell, we'd have never opened the door because he didn't look pest control reppy. Okay, he looked somebody like that looked more like an axe murderer. But this guy, now he could have been an axe murderer, but he needed access to our door. He needed access to our lives. He needed us to open up and let him be a pest control rep. So what did he do? He was clean cut. He looked nice, had a little company logo, had a little uniform on. He had a little clipboard with some brochures, and I could see right in the parking lot, I could see a little van with the logo of the company. I said, oh, okay. The first thing that came to my mind was not, wow, this is an axe murderer. This could be somebody who's going to come into my home and harm me and my wife, my family. No, he looked like a salesman, and I'm going to be kind, at least open the door. And he got access because he played the part. He played the role. Now, and honestly, I did find out a little bit about him. He was a young married boy, young man, married man. I found out he was a lot more than a pest control rep. But that day, he needed to be seen as a pest control rep so that he could try to sell me a contract to help feed his family. Every day, you and I get up, just like the priest in the Old Testament. It may look different from place to place. We don't all have to line up and dress the same and act the same and talk the same and preach the same. But every day, we suit up and we go out and we have to play the part. We have to play the role. And your church has an idea in their mind, this is what looks pastoral. And when we look pastoral, we have a better chance of gaining access to their life and guiding them away from hell and toward heaven. And that's what it's all about. Not our comfort, what we want, how we like to dress and how we like to act. Paul said, I have become all things to all men, that by all means I may save some. And so when you're with the Jews, when you're with the people that observe Judaism but they're Gentiles, or when you're with the pagans, when you're with the weak, wherever you're at, they have an idea of how a pastor should act, and we need to act like it. Not because we are going to sell out, but because we want to gain access to their lives. Well, there you go. I don't know if Bill Clinton was secretly a preacher, but he sure can teach us a few things about being a good preacher. Hope you guys are having a good day. You guys and gals have a great day tomorrow. God's blessings on your life. We'll see you around the bend. Let's keep running to win for the gospel's sake.